Hello, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful segment of Sound Mind here on Hope TV. My name is Bryant Collier, your host for today, and I am so happy that you are here to join with us in this very crucial conversation. I want to begin by saying thank you to our executive producer, Dr. E. Dewey Smith, for his leadership and direction with Hope TV, and then to you, our followers. Thank you so much for everything you do to contribute with your watching and your giving with Hope TV. We are so appreciative as we continue to give you content that helps to feed your mind, body, soul, and spirit for all generations. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, just three of the countless names of individuals who have experienced social injustice in this country. And right now, the current temperature of our world, it's crazy. There are riots and protesting. There is murder in the streets. And for those of us that are watching from our screens on social media, some of us are even in the streets coping with the movement. All of those entities, all of those activities have created for some of us some internal conflict. How do you cope with the trauma of this social injustice, this world of upsets, of inequality, racial profiling? And so today we wanted to bring our friend, Dr. Margie Gill. She is a clinical supervisor and assistant clinic director for the psychology department of Grinnell University. She is also the executive director for Tabitha's House, a nonprofit organization that provides direct care and services and resources to survivors of human trafficking. But she is going to be our expert today to help us work through this. Please welcome Dr. Margie Gill. Hello, my friend.
Hello. How I want to say how are you, but during this time, that's almost like a loaded question. Just
It's
saying.
funny. Yeah, it's funny that you even say that, because I felt you getting ready to say, how are you? And my body literally tensed up. For those that are watching with us today, please feel free to comment, give us your questions, give us your thoughts. We want you to be a part of this dialogue as well. Dr. Gill, 2 days ago, I woke up and I wasn't really feeling my day. And in the middle of the day, I really shut down and I went into this abyss of depression. And what I realized is that I've been scrolling and watching stories and watching the news, and between pandemic and social injustice and murder, I got overwhelmed. This is not normal. I don't know anyone who would think this is normal, but this is not normal. And we would be remiss if we talked about having a sound mind, mental health and emotional health, without dealing with what the world is going through right now. Dr. Gill, can you help us?
I would do my absolute best, Brian, because right now it's tense times. I mean, for people of color, but right now, more specifically, Black folks. It really is. It's almost like Black people are an open target. And the people who have been in place who was placed to protect, if we can't trust that system, where do we go? Who do we talk to? How do we cope with what's going on? How do we, implement some type of change? Where do we start? With what we've all been seeing when it comes to George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Mr. Arbery, the murder of Miss Taylor, that was murder. All three. It was murder. I mean, just there's no other way to say it. They were murdered. And almost in an open lynching style. So it is traumatic when you turn on the TV And if it's not talking about COVID-19, then it's talking about the different cases and the different protests, the different marches that's going on all around the world. Because now it's not just in the US, you have other countries that's protesting the maltreatment of Black people.
Mm-hmm.
People know that it exists, and it's not just, here in the US, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's trauma. That I can't put it any other way. We are being, everybody who is watching the TV, who is listening to the different broadcast, podcasts, whatever it is, we are exposing ourselves to trauma. It is the same type of trauma that someone who has physically endured something that has caused immense psychological distress. It's the same. But this trauma is racial trauma. Racial trauma.
It almost feels like we're at war, and we are victims of war and prisoners of war. And I don't mean to be insensitive to anyone who's actually served our country in war, but what we're experiencing right now, it's like I said before, it's not normal. And so I think I want to start off this conversation of how do you even begin to protect your mental and emotional health when everything is so raw, open, and exposed?
One of the first things I usually say is to really watch how consumed you are, what you are watching, what you are listening to, what you are really focusing on. So you have to shift your focus. You want to keep up with what's going on, and especially in your communities, because the protests, they're everywhere. But what the news is centering on, they're centering on some of the negative aspects of the protests and not some of the more peaceful parts. So you do have peaceful protests, but you got to limit how much you are consuming this stuff that's making you feel the way you are feeling. You have to limit it.
Limit.
Yes, you got to limit that consumption. I had a friend of mine tell me they were watching like the news stations, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, because they wanted to see the different narrative that each news station is broadcasting. But this person was doing this like 10 hours out of the day. That's overconsumption. So when you just consume all of that, and then you expect to disconnect and then live your life as normal, it doesn't work that way, because that's all you've been exposed to over this time period.
Yeah.
So you got to put.
I think. No. I was going to just add on to what you were saying, like overconsumption, but it's almost like a fear of not watching makes you out of the loop. And so you're scared you're going to miss something that's crucial or important. And so it's almost like you're hurting yourself to make sure you're not in danger later on. And you're literally stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And your mind wants to take you there to where you want to find out. I got to see what's happening next. I want to be as informed as I can, because I might miss something. That's kind of like I don't know. That's your protection mode going into play. That's your mind going into protection mode. What can I do to protect myself? Well, I gotta be informed. But there are limits to how much information you should take in. When I look at it like this, I'm in the field of psychology, and we have this book. Let me get this book for you.
Get your book, Dr. Gill. Get your book.
Okay, so this is our DSM. So the DSM, we use this when we want to diagnose and we want to properly categorize, whatever the symptomology is. But when we were in school, we did not, you see the size of this?
Mm-hmm.
We did not consume this book in one day.
Right. Right.
Because that would be overwhelming. That in
Okay.
itself could be triggering and traumatizing. To think
Mm-hmm.
that you have to know this big book in and out. You know, you got to know these codes. You got to know the symptomology. You got to know what the presenting issues are. But we didn't have to take all of that information in and learn it at one time.
Right.
So we had to do it in small chunks. And so when we
Mm-hmm.
consume information, whether it's, you know, being on social media, watching the news, conversing with people about the developments and what's going on, we need to do that in chunks. We got to be more intentional in how much of this we allow to consume us. Now, I do know it's people on the front lines who want to give their time. They want to protest. They want their voices to be heard. But at the same time, they got to put measures in place to protect their sanity too.
Right. 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 I want to ask you a question. So there are some people who have outright emotions about what's going on. It's anger, it's rage, it's frustration. They're vocal. They are wearing their experiences out loud, and they are able to verbally process what's going on. What are some signs for people who, like me, couldn't really articulate what happened, but felt overwhelmed in the process, and a sign that maybe you've overloaded?
That's when you start to feel the impacts of trauma. So I mentioned, you know, it's racial trauma. So if we had to define exactly, you know, if we define exactly what trauma is when you experience something that causes psychological distress. It's normally followed by something that's life-threatening, or something that has just provoked this emotion. I mean, something that is terrible, something that you're witnessing. So in this time right now, for Black people, knowing that Black lives are being taken and the people are not being charged, and there are no penalties for taking a Black life, how is that impacting the mental health, the psychological welfare of Black people? What is that doing? So that is a classification of trauma, is it not?
Yeah.
It's life-threatening.
Yeah.
You know, it's terrible. It's horrible. So you have people who experience the extreme anger. It is sadness. Sometimes it's survivor's guilt. You know, look at the who recorded what happened to George Floyd. You know, she was receiving death threats. Can you imagine the psychological distress that she's under right now? Not only from witnessing what happened, but from the consequences of what she's going through right now for recording the event. Without her recording, would we know what we know today?
Wouldn't know any of it.
We wouldn't know any of it. So you have that survivor's guilt. You have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, it's a lot. It's a lot that goes into what PTSD, you know, the signs, the symptoms. Is the person able to recognize what's triggering? So when you are being overly consumed and you're watching TV and you're talking about it on social media, you're using voice, at the same time, you're being triggered. And the severity of the symptoms you experience, that contributes to PTSD. You know, in the future, will this episode be generalized to other episodes that may be similar to what you are actually going through right now? How is this going to impact your relationships? How is this going to impact your quality of sleep, your eating patterns? All of that's important to a sound, you know, a sound mind. That's important to you know, proper I would say healthy habits. All of that contributes to all of that.
Yeah. I think that I'll be honest with you, if I can just be completely candid,
Go
it
ahead.
is really dangerous right now because even in the faith world, we tend to sensationalize things and make things super spiritual. But grief is real and trauma is real. And I don't want to offend anyone with this, but I feel like it's truth. I know it's true. Trauma, you just can't pray away. And so for a lot of people that are out there, this is not the first traumatic experience of their life. And I know that this conversation is really a multi-series conversation, but can you kind of dig in what it may be like for somebody right now who's maybe 2 generations ahead of me that has experienced this type of trauma just 50, 60 years ago, maybe even less?
This is, remember I just mentioned about different episodes that we experience in life and different times, different seasons in life. We have moments where, you know, it's almost like, didn't we just experience this? It could be a trigger. It could be
Yeah.
triggering. It can cause people to go in, to isolate, to withdraw from family members, to not have the same drive and motivation because they are expecting the same results because obviously then nothing changed. So then you become pessimistic about what's going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have hope. You lose hope. You lose sight of what the future could be. And then you sink down deeper into states of depression, and your depression level rises, your level of anxiety rises, because now you're thinking about your children, your grandchildren.
Yep.
Will you ever receive that knock on your door at midnight telling you a loved one has been violently assaulted or killed by somebody who's put in place to protect?
Yep.
Or if it's been killed by a citizen that's trying to make a citizen arrest for a crime that was not even committed.
How do you, it's like you're literally, you don't know where to go. And I think that's really what's most traumatic that I'm hearing from friends and on my social media thread. What is safety now? Like, where as a person of color, is there to be safe for me? And that kind of burden and pressure, we've been talking about with COVID-19, how wearing masks and social distancing is the new normal. Dr. Gill, what are the implications of this type of social injustice and rioting and protesting? We don't know how long this is going to last now, because we are almost reliving literally the civil rights movement. What does it look like for this to be the new normal for us mentally and emotionally?
That's a loaded question. We already have a new normal we were trying to adjust to when it comes to COVID-19.
Right.
That in itself was a new normal, with the social distancing, with the different types of restrictions when we're out in public, and wearing masks and making sure you have your cleaning supplies, and what happens when you can't get the wipes or bleach, or that in itself was an adjustment. Now you add this layer of food insecurity for some communities of color. You add in increased crime, because now people are functioning in survival mode. Then you add in, loss of employment or a drastic decrease in the amount of wages that you make. You add all these in, and then it becomes complex, a form of complex trauma. So when you look at the new normal and the implications of this civil unrest that we are experiencing now, you have deep embedded wounds that are being reopened. You have people who want to draw from your experience as a Black person because some may genuinely want to understand, but I want people to know you don't have to take that upon yourself to explain and to speak for all Black folks. Because that in itself, every time you try to explain and you try to teach somebody, that's mentally, it's draining.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's draining.
Yeah.
So, with the new normal, you really have to take a step back. And I keep going back to this. You got to process your feelings first before you can pour out to somebody else.
That's good, Dr. Gill. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Process your feelings before you try to help someone else.
Yes. You have to. And then you need to develop your own soul plan. Mm-hmm. What are you doing to cater to your soul, to your feelings, to your when you ask yourself the question, I tell clients, I tell people I interact with, when you are in, like you mentioned the moments of distress, you went through a bout of depression. When you were there, you're out now. That's a blessing. But look at what you had to do to come out. There was a little bit of intentionality. You had to tell yourself, I'm right here right now, but I'm not going to stay here. I am going to release this. I am going to make myself do this. And these are the consequences of me coming out. I will feel more powerful. You have to have powerful self-talk and positive self-talk. I tell people sometimes you have to take a step back, do some deep breathing strategies, because deep breathing, sometimes that increases relaxation. And some people don't know how to breathe. Some people don't know how to, it becomes a hyperventilating type thing. I found, some of these little pinwheels, I use these to teach people how, just how to breathe. I'll tell people to take a deep breath in. And when you take that deep breath in, you breathe in so that your belly button starts to protrude. It starts to stick out. And then you release. And as you release, you imagine this spinning for as long as it can. And so it's just a slight blow. That helps with anxiety. Deep breathing does. It reduces the tension that you're feeling. It takes practice to get through it, but it's just playing around with your mental health. People, I understand people are upset. People got to learn anger management strategies. People got to learn how to take it. What you're seeing in the news today with people throwing things, breaking things, I don't condone violence. But what we are seeing is the response to trauma.
Yeah. Most definitely. I wanna actually tag on that really quickly. When we're talking about the responses of people, where we are with trauma, and like you said, just these exercises that are happening. I want to put a plug out there, and if you know someone who is on the front line, please tag them in the comments now. Share this with them. They need to hear this. You need to protect yourself while you're on the front line. If your activism is actually marching and protesting, if it's making signs, if it's sharing content and information on social media, you have to protect yourself. And I'm not just talking about your body. I'm talking about your mind and your emotions. It's the frontline workers, Dr. Gill. It's the frontline workers. And I think that's what is the scariest to me in this time of civil war. We're not resting. And I know that there's so much more work ahead. I know this fight is not going to be over. I have a feeling that this isn't going to be a hashtag movement. I have a feeling that this is going to continue. But I am worried that our frontline people are not doing the mental, emotional health to keep them on the front lines. What would you say towards that?
Here again, it goes back, it ties back into trauma, because remember, the people on the front line, whether they are leading, whether they are participating, no matter what role they have in, the front line, they too have to be intentional in taking care of their mental health, because when you are out protesting, your cortisol levels are increased.
Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Yes, I will. So what cortisol does, that's like a hormone that's released when you experience trauma, when you experience like immediate rage. It comes with your fight or flight or your freeze. It's like a baby who has been carried by a mother who's been like under a lot of stress during that pregnancy, where that baby is bathed in cortisol. So when this baby comes out, and the response to being in that cortisol, that baby cries a lot, has sleepless nights, doesn't have a healthy diet. You're wondering, why is this baby crying so much? I don't know. Well, reflect back on what the mom went through during that pregnancy. So that mom was carrying all that stress around. So look at the frontline workers. If they are carrying all the anger, all the upset, all the distress, not releasing it, that's bathing their brains in that cortisol. So when it's bathed in the cortisol, your senses, your 5 senses become muffled. So what does that mean? That means they lose a sense of self. Your vision may not be as crisp as it was. Your hearing may be a little bit distorted. Your sense of feeling may be distorted. Cortisol plays a huge role in, the trauma response, and it's triggering. And I keep going back to that word triggering, because once that trigger happens, that cortisol level spikes, and here we go. And it takes a minute to get the cortisol level down. It just, once the episode is over, that does not mean that cortisol level returns back to normal in the blink of an eye. No, it takes time to get that back down. So these frontline people, they need to implement some form of self-care. Some form, whether it's stepping away, going off and just, sitting, having your own moment of silence for self, to regroup. Make sure you stay hydrated. Make sure you wear comfortable clothing. Make sure, you do your best to have a proper diet. Watch the different type of snacks you're taking out with you. So you want to make sure you're active and you exercise as a form of releasing. People like, oh, I got to stay in shape. Yeah, you got to stay in shape, but exercise is also good for mental health too. It's not just always about the physical.
That's
so
good.
does this all make sense with how this ties in to the trauma?
Oh yes. I have 2 more, and our time is running out. We're going to have to do a second part to this conversation, but I want to know if I know. So I have a friend who is on the front line and very large activist, and they shut down. They don't talk to anybody. They completely zone out. What would you say to those of us who are here watching, and we have friends and family that we know are on the front line and are investing emotional and mental energy in this fight? What can we do to support them and help their mental, emotional health?
If you know someone who is on the front line and they're out, they're leading the efforts for change, because that's what they're doing. They're leading the efforts for change. They're leading the efforts for people to have equity, access, harmony, to be able to participate in just life stuff that everybody should have access to, our civil and our human rights. But if you know somebody who's out there on the front line and they're fighting, be that support, be that active ear to hear. If you can help out by just say, you know what we're going to do today, we're going to disconnect from everything and we're going to go for a walk. We're going to offload, because you will come back even stronger once you take a period of rest. Why do you think we have sleep cycles? We have sleep cycles because that's what the body needs in order to heal and for the body to rejuvenate. So
That's good.
be that support, be that support. Whether it's making sure they have something, a healthy meal, you know, that's packed with adequate proteins and vegetables and nutrients. What supplements are they taking? Well, and then you have to think about what injuries are they sustaining while they're out there. And when I say injuries, I'm talking about physical injuries, but I'm also talking about the emotional injuries. Being exposed to what's going on in itself is an emotional scar. But what other injuries, what are they witnessing when they are out there? How are they offloading what they are witnessing? You know, advise them to seek mental health counseling. But this is important. When they do seek mental health counseling, who are they receiving those services from? You make sure that that counselor or that clinician is well versed on what's going on in today's time. Because see, those traditional Western, they're not going to work in this time.
Come on, Dr. Gill. Come on, Dr. Gill.
That's not going to work. You cannot go to a clinician, and when you tell them that your presenting issue is everything that's going on in the world right now, you know, I'm just stressed about it. And then, you know, they may ask, you know, tell me more, because, you know, that's a counseling statement right there. Tell me more about it. And that's because the counselor really genuinely wants to know more. But at the same time, if they can't relate to what you are going through, or if they don't have any empathy to be able to help you go or help you come out of that depressive state, or to control the anger you are feeling, or to manage your emotions in a healthy way, change counselors. Change counselors.
Point blank, period.
Point blank, period. Change counselors. If you are working with someone who does not understand the trauma that you have been exposed to, or the racial injustices that have existed for over 400 years in this country, change. Because it's not about you teaching that counselor. It's about what that counselor can help you do to heal.
That's good. That's good.
Because remember, when you retell these experiences that you've had, you are re-exposing yourself to trauma.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are.
You are.
I Dr. Gill, it's a lot here. It's a lot trying to unpack this. I'll be honest with you, even as we talk about it now, I feel the weight of what's happening and what's going on even more, because when all is said and done and when the victory is won, I'm just scared there's some wounded individuals who won't even, they won't be covered with blood. Their mind and their heart will be the one that's bloody, and I'm scared. I'm scared about the mental, emotional health for some to make it to the promised land and not be able to enjoy it because they're not well enough to.
Right. And that's the importance of being that support, to let them know that they are not alone in this fight. Come up with different strategies that may not be as physically exhaustive. You know, I love when Killer Mike said, you know, we need to plot, we need to plan, we need to strategize. I know one was mobilize, and then we just need to implement the plan pretty much.
Right.
That strategy, that strategize, that's important. Because
it's important.
It's important. Just look at some of the businesses that have been impacted. Well, some businesses may have had insurance that will cover the content or the building damage and all that, and they're going to pick back up and go right along. But at the end of the day, Black people will still have injustices. So you got to weigh it. Don't tear up the stuff. You got to weigh it. Don't tear up the stuff in your community. That's number one. Do not tear it up, especially if it fulfills a need of the community. But you got to take ownership. Yeah. When I say take ownership, become that business owner in your community. Buy the block.
Yeah.
If this generation is coming up right now, look at the numbers. This is a large generation of young people. If they would focus on building wealth, not just assuming material things, but actually building wealth to own your own community. That in itself would make a major shift. I mean, can we
drop these nuggets? Drop these nuggets, Dr. Gill. Drop these nuggets.
I was just talking to somebody last night, and on the phone I was sharing some of my personal experiences of the racial injustices that I have experienced, both in my professional life and my personal life. I was telling them how, I think it was Bishop Jakes who was stopped in his own yard before, or in his subdivision, because the officer questioned whether or not he resided there. My husband had the same experience at our house. He was in our driveway talking to some of our other neighbors, some other Black men in our community, and the officer stopped to ask if everything was all right. And pretty much, I mean, they were like, well, we're standing outside conversing. Everything's fine. Not only did he flash the light on them as a form of interrogation, but, he came back through and did it again. I mean, it's thick. It is thick. The police have been called on us, the neighbors, because of suspicious activity, because my husband loaded up lawn equipment. Lawn equipment, went to cut one of the properties that we own, went to cut the grass because he looked suspicious. The police surrounded the vehicle.
What?
Yes. So these little episodes, you got microaggressions, you got micro insults, you got the racial tensions that we are experiencing right now. All of this comes full back into play with protecting your mental health. My husband Alton could have been, he was traumatized from that. He was.
Yeah.
So I had to implement.
Rightfully so.
Yes,
Rightfully
because
so.
guns were drawn
Rightfully
on him. Guns were drawn. And you were surrounded by all of these officers. They ran the serial numbers on all of his lawn equipment because they assumed it was all stolen. Yes. Yes. So when my husband came home, Brian, I had to have him indulge in self-care. I was, as a wife, I was intentional in saying, you know what? We're going to disconnect. We're not going to talk about it anymore. We're going to indulge in some type of self-care. We just going to chill out. We're going to love on each other. I'm here for you. I'm your strength right now. And we're going to make it do what it do on our terms.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care is important.
It's important. And here's what's awesome about that horrible situation is that he had a wife who was prepared to help nurture and love and help in that process. Dr. Gill, our time is up for today. If you've enjoyed this, please comment, tell us your questions, your thoughts, help us with this conversation. We want to keep it going. Dr. Gill, we'll be bringing you back for a part 2 in this, because I want to dig more into the generational lines of trauma that you shared with us earlier, because I know we don't have the time today to cover all of that. But Dr. Gill, are there any last thoughts you want to leave with us for today?
I just want to leave the message of encouragement to tell everybody, stay encouraged. Be encouraged, implement your self-care, but don't be silenced, because silence is a response. So silence can give you the perception that you're unbothered, you're unscathed by what's going on around you. Let your voice be heard. But don't feel as though you have to speak for all Black people. Don't feel as though you have to explain privilege to other people. They have to confront their own privilege and their own guilt that they have of not acknowledging. So you have to be intentional in yourself and taking care of yourself, because the way you love you, that's how other people will love you. So you have to love yourself. Okay? You gotta be. The way you love you determines how other people will love you. So love you. Look in the mirror and tell yourself, I am powerful. I am beautiful. Have a list of affirmations. If you I tell people this, and then I'll end with this. Write those affirmations in a dry erase marker on the mirror in your bathroom. And they're right there every day. And then you can just take a moist piece of paper towel or something, or a washcloth, wipe it out. You could change it. You can have your list. Write what you are. You are fierce. You are bold. You are loving. You are kind. You are a change maker. You know, write those things out. Say those things, because when you say it enough, you become it.
Dr. Gill, thank you. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and your knowledge in helping us through this. My friends, family out there, listen, if you're on the front line, if you are an activist, even if you're helping just spread the information or you're giving care to someone else who is, protect yourself, not just physically from harm, but emotionally and mentally. You've got to do the work of self-care to work on yourself. These are dangerous times we're in, and we want you to be healthy and well to enjoy the fruit of your labor that is coming. Thank you so much for being a part of another segment of Sound Mind, and I hope that you will monitor your emotional and mental health. Until next time, take care.